I just like to cook. So I like to accommodate any type of food that people are needing for like their catering events, whether it's, small family dinners or, large corporate events, weddings, whatever.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and my guests today are a couple that not only helped introduce me to a new cuisine, one that I long aspired to try, but have also inspired me with their selflessness and their desire to just help other people. Out of helping young people, they've spawned two businesses, and I'm excited to help them tell their story today. So joining me on the podcast today are the owners of Against the Current and Tradish, Cassie and Quentin Hinman. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to talk about both the businesses you have today. I want to start with Against the Current because that's a business you started first. So if somebody is hearing about Against the Current for the first time, how would you describe this business to them?
So essentially, I just like to cook. So I like to accommodate any type of food that people are needing for like their catering events, whether it's, small family dinners or, large corporate events, weddings, whatever. We just essentially can accommodate whatever type of food, I guess.
And so a lot of what we incorporate is like some indigenous concepts as well to what our business is. And so not what a lot of people don't understand or don't know is the history of Omaha. And so we have the Omaha tribe, and that is where we get our name from. And so that directly translates to Against the Current. And so there was a little bit of like paying some homage to the people that were here and to my ancestry and to just kind of that background and where we come from. So, and I think as Cassie was talking about the versatility, one of the things that really inspired it was like we left Boys Town and we were just like, man, what are we going to do? Like 8 teenagers living with us. And one of the things that we learned during that time was how much food could be not just like a healing factor, but how much it brought us together. So like we had kids that called us everything but a child of Christ one day. But when we sat down for dinner, we sat and we ate, and it facilitated like relationships between us. Like our kids would look forward to that growth, or not growth, but that opportunity to kind of gather and eat. And eventually we built relationships sitting around tables with our kids, and we just saw the impact of what food had in those moments.
That brings me to, I was going to get to this later, but you brought it up so perfectly now. Cassie, you had a quote that I found where you said, "A shared meal has the power to calm even the stormiest days. It's a time to connect, laugh, and breathe, no matter what the day brought." And that kind of plays perfectly into what you just said, Quentin. What do you think it is, both of you, about a meal that kind of just creates that calm and brings people together regardless of what the rest of the day has brought?
Well, it cures the hanger, so that helps.
That's very true. Hanger is a very real thing, and it causes conflicts.
Yes. But I think it's just a time to like, you can be silent and you can stuff your face and you can just be with a person and enjoy like what you're doing versus feeling like you have to like talk over stuff or, hash things out or be angry because you're in a time that you're enjoying yourself.
She talked about hanger being real, and then like just being like I don't want to say a motivator, but I just remember there was a kid that we had at our house, and the school would call us and be like, "Hey, so-and-so had such a rough day at school." And I knew not to even try to talk to the kid. And I would get a snack and I would put it on the counter and I would just kind of walk away and that kid would come in. And then what happened was I would look to see how far into the snack they were before I even came up and said, "Hey, so what happened at school? Like, we need to talk through some things there." And I mean, we've dealt with some of the roughest times with some of our kids, and we've had some kids who have had some like explosive behaviors, but it was one of those things where it's like, eventually it was like they look forward to sitting down and like, one time we had a kid, and we call it like going uncooperative, but he was mad because somebody threw away the green beans, and it's like, it's green beans, kid, but like Cassie had like brown sugar and bacon and all this other stuff, so it wasn't like healthy green beans by any means, but this kid was looking forward to the meatloaf and green beans, and one of the kids who I think he was mad at Cassie for some reason, so he threw the green beans away, and the rest of our house was like ready to riot. And but it was those moments that they look forward to, and it was kind of finding those ways that those meals that really kind of like that they looked forward to, that we could share that time. But then even when we talk about food, it is a way of caring for other people. It is like an expression of love. Like, from a cultural context, we also look at it as like those relatives took care of us. So we look at like the plants and the animals as being our relatives, and there's a sacrifice for that meal. And then even the people who prepared the meal, like there is like, everything you do is an extension of you. It's your energy. It's you caring. And so it's not just like prepping that meal, but it's all the effort and everything that goes into it. And what was crazy was working with teenagers. They started to realize the impact of food and the impact of like Cassie just taking time to make stuff from scratch, homemade every single day. And they all came from different backgrounds, but it was one thing that they appreciated was just having somebody who was consistent and constant and cared for them. And they, you know, sometimes they got to curate the menu in our home. And that was one thing that they looked forward to. So there was a lot of ability to kind of bring them in different ways, but it was just kind of understanding that impact, or just being able to see it kind of unfold in our home a little bit.
That is a beautiful thing, that food is just that shared love language, and that regardless of what else is going on, when you create that home-cooked meal for someone, whether it's something that they asked for or that you're just passionate about and you provide for them, it's just like you feel that special feeling, and some of those walls start to come down a little bit. I'm sure that you guys experience that, and we'll get more into that. But before we get too far, I want to make sure that we introduce Tradish, which on August 12th, 2025, you made your first posts on Facebook introducing that concept. And as great as Against the Current is, and I'm excited about that, this was the one that really got me interested, because Native American food it's such a beautiful cuisine, and it's one that's so underrepresented here in Omaha. Like, if you ask me where else can I even get that, I wouldn't have an answer for you. Like, this was my first introduction. What was it that made you guys say, hey, we're the ones, we can bring this cuisine to Omaha? What made you passionate about starting this concept?
I think there's a lot of versatility, but it's just access, and it's just the knowledge of where to find it, having the resources or taking that initiative. We looked at the market and we're just like, there's no place to get an Indian taco. I think at the time there was one other place, and it was Ramona's, and they had to close their doors, and they were out in North Omaha. And so we were just like, well, this is an area that we can introduce some of these concepts, but also looking at indigenous foods and kind of what we do at Tradish, it's a wide spectrum. And so like we try to introduce some of the traditional foods. So when we have like things like our choke cherry chicken or our braised bison, we try to go more of our traditional like concepts there, and we try to source from indigenous communities. So Cassie could probably tell you where we source from a little bit better than I can. But then also like fry bread. A lot of times people bring up fry bread, and it's kind of like a quagmire. It's like really complex how people look at it, because it's not a traditional food. But it tells a story. And so it is a story of like resilience and survival. It's our grandmothers finding a way to fill bellies. And so when we were displaced and placed onto reservations, part of those treaty agreements were some of the rations and the foods that we were provided. And eventually what it was just, we would get not the best of the best. And so it was kind of picked over. And so kids were starving and people were hungry. And so they took rancid flour and they found a way to make it into a bread. And they had the lard that was left over from the animals, and they used that, and they fried up bread. And so it was like grease bread, fry bread, gabubu bread, some of those things. Like, we didn't have breads like that. It wasn't like breads and pastas and things of that nature weren't like a part of our diet. And so, like, when you look at some very traditional indigenous chefs, like I'm Awamni, Sean Sherman, he's very widely known, but he does all pre-contact, pre-colonial foods. And ours is a fusion of kind of traditional, where we can incorporate as much as we can, and some of like the more modern. And so it was just a unique concept. And so it's not the same as some of these other restaurants that are out there, but we put the effort in to kind of learn a little bit more about those traditional practices and those traditional food ways, while also paying homage to some of like the more modern or the more contemporary foods that are out there.
And I love that you guys do that. It was the season of Top Chef last year, so they were in Canada. It was the Canada season, and they had an episode where they went out and they were just they cooked and served food like in nature, and the food that they were creating was so beautiful, and it was all like centered around Native American cuisine. And I was just like, I want this so badly. I want to try this. And what you guys are serving off the food truck isn't exactly what that was, but it was my first introduction to fry bread. And my wife and I, as we're eating this, we're just like, where has this been? This is delicious. And the choke cherry chicken was fantastic. The Three Sisters salad was really good. I can't wait to try the ribs at some point, the bison ribs at some point. Anyway, we'll talk more about that, right. But very, very good. I can't wait to try more of it. But I want to get into you guys' background first. How did you two meet? How did you two come together?
So I had a friend at the time who was dating his older brother, and she was just like, hey, you should meet. You know, it'd be really cool if, you know, we were dating, you know, in the same family, I guess. I don't know. But so she introduced us, and it was kind of all uphill from there, I guess. Downhill. Easy. It wasn't hard, I guess.
You just set it off?
Yeah. And I together almost every day since.
Some of that's true. So
be careful, man. I had
to work so hard in that moment. Like, I just remember, like, everything that she said. Like, my brother was dating her best friend, and I was talking to this person, and it was not a great relationship. And my brother was talking, and he's like, you know, come hang out. And like, he's like, my girlfriend, her friend's gonna be over. I'd like you to meet her and everything else. And like, Cassie was so reserved, and she was like way cooler than I was, and I wasn't used to that. Like, I was kind of wild back in the day, and I didn't really care about like impressing people, like, you know, different podcast maybe, but we could talk about stories of things that I did that were just crazy. But she sat there, and I had to like, I've never wanted to like get somebody to talk to me so much, and I just got like, maybe, oh, okay, oh, a little bit, like just. And I was like pulling words, and I never had that issue. And she left, and my brother's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have no idea. I have nothing that I like, I'm getting nowhere here. And I was like, and I didn't want to look like a nerd because like, you know, like I wanted to get her number. I wanted to talk to her, and, she left, and I didn't want to like book after her or anything else like that. And so she went out to the car, and I sat there and I was talking to my brother. I was like, oh, I think I'm going to go too. And then I tried to run down the stairs of that apartment so quick that I missed every single stair on the way down. And then I look up, and here she sees me at the window. And so then like, I tried to like play it off cool. Like, there's stipulations. Like, I wouldn't give you my number. And then like, I was like, but there's some stipulations. Like, you can't just let it sit idly in your phone. And I was like, you know what, better yet, you just give me your number. And then from there, we kind of like hung out every day, and we just kind of hit it off. So,
well, clearly you've got something going, and God brought you together for a reason, because you're doing amazing things. You got 4 kids now, and you ended up, you guys have mentioned it already, you were at Boys Town. You guys have helped more than 70 youth kind of find their way. You've helped them and find a home and kind of really kind of restart their lives, I would say. What inspired you guys to get involved with Boys Town?
I think initially I've always had like a passion to, I guess, help kids. I never really knew about Boys Town until I met Quentin. I always just anticipated, like doing foster care or something to just, I guess, just to help those in need. And then his mom had mentioned family teaching at Boys Town, and I was like, oh, okay. And we looked into it, and then it kind of, he was already working in the Psychiatric Medical Institute for Kids, so he was kind of in that field already. And so, yeah, it
was the first year. So I started coaching youth football, and then after coaching football, that kind of opened up a door for over in Council Bluffs, there was a residential care center for kids, and I worked my way up, but I missed our entire first year of our daughter's life. So I started off as like a youth care worker, and then became a supervisor, then ran the rec program, and then I was working overnights and during the day, and so and I had like one day off, so I was working like maybe 70 hours a week, if not more.
Holy smokes!
So, but it was just kind of like worked so that we could get a home. Like we were going to buy a house, and it all kind of fell through. Like I worked so much overtime that they couldn't count that towards my income, and somehow Boys Town, like we got in contact with them, and we both had large families growing up. So my family did foster care for 5 of my siblings, and so we had at most, or at minimum, 9 kids in our house for almost 10 years. Or not 9 kids, 9 people in our house for almost 10 years. So I was used to busy, and I was used to all these kids, and I was used to that. And it was an easy transition working with kids from coaching to, having that at the house, having all the younger siblings. I was the oldest, and then going over to Boys Town, just the business, it just felt normal for us. But I think that was kind of the introduction, is foster care. My family did that. My mom and dad worked as youth care workers. My dad worked at Cooper Village. My mom worked at Boys Town. And for some reason, I don't know how we didn't know about family teaching until a couple of years into into everything. But it worked out good. It was a good learning experience, and we grew a lot from that too. So
yeah, we started. I turned 21 in June, and we started November 1st that year, and then the day after our oldest daughter turned 1, we got our first kid. So it's been a long journey.
And what was it, Cassie, about that experience that kind of, I don't know if it sparked your love for food, but it allowed you to express that love? What was it about being at Boys Town that kind of brought out your food side?
So I actually didn't really know how to cook before Boys Town. I tried a little bit, but it wasn't, I didn't really know a whole lot. I didn't grow up with, a lot of homemade meals and stuff like that. So I essentially started making stuff from scratch because it's essentially cheaper to feed a large group of people when you're making everything yourself. And I was just good at it. I like it. That's how I show my love for people. I'm not a very emotional person. But one thing that you do know that if I make a meal for you, it's because I care about you, and it's not a chore. It's not something I do because I feel like I have to. And I just kind of, I guess, honed in on different things while we were there and learned how different, I guess, ingredients interact with each other, and, not just, I continued to learn, I guess. It wasn't just I make these things really well, so I'm just going to continue this. So Yeah, I just really liked it.
And if there's one thing we know about kids and teenagers, it's that they do not hold back on their opinions, especially when it comes to food. So how did catering to that audience help you kind of hone in on your recipes and not only say, hey, I really like this, this is an expression of love, but hey, these are the things that I can do to improve maybe?
Most of the time, the kids really like this stuff. But yeah, if there was ever anything that people, I always look for like that feedback. Like, don't tell me it's good. Tell me, what is it? Like, do I need to improve on something? Is it too salty? Is it too, garlicky? Is it, what is it? And so having a lot of people's opinions, every night really helped to, I guess, shape that feedback. And, you can't please everybody all the time, but it is good to have that feedback still. So
at what point did the idea start to percolate in your mind that, hey, I'm pretty good at this whole cooking thing. Maybe this can be something more?
Well, I don't know that I ever saw life outside of Boys Town. We kind of planned to stay until our kids graduated high school. And then we had a fourth kid, and it didn't really work out that way because you can't have 4 biological kids working as family teachers. So, as we transitioned to leave, I was like, okay, we need to figure something out. I'm not the college type. I'm not going to sit in a classroom, that's not my thing. Tried it a few times, didn't work. So I was like, I need to figure out a way to make money. So I dipped my feet into the insurance world, and I was like, yeah, it's not really for me. I'm not a good talker, I guess. I'm not a good speaker.
You're doing a great job right now.
Thanks. I'm trying. So I did that for a couple years and kind of started with the cakes and stuff like that, just the cottage bakery. And then I got access to a commercial kitchen. I was like, well, I can expand into catering then. And so I started with the catering for a while. I was like, didn't really ever see myself moving on from that because, easier, I guess, because I can make my own schedule and I can choose, I don't want to work that day, so I'm not going to take any clients that day. But as we kind of grew and talked about more things, like owning a restaurant or a food truck or something, I was like, that is something that I can see happening. And so it just kind of bloomed from there.
All right, let's back up a little bit because I want to go back to December 26, 2018. You guys post a lot on Facebook, so I had to scroll a long ways back to find this first post. But that was your first post for Against the Current, or at that point it was called Cassie's Creations. And you, like you said, you started off with baking. How did you get into baking originally? What was it that made that the original business model?
I always really liked the cool cakes that you saw on TV. And I always thought that it would be cool for I guess our kids too, or all the kids in our house to experience a really cool cake, whatever design they wanted. It wasn't, the simple, as much as I like store brand cake, it's cool to get something a little bit more extravagant. So I always made their cakes from scratch, and however, they chose the design and stuff like that, and I tried to make it a little bit more than just the simple frosting and happy birthday kind of on it. So kind of started with that, and then as we left family teaching and went on. I just kind of continued to hone in on my skills with that, and yeah.
So your early posts, you were posting about cookies, you were posting about brownies, muffins, pies, things like that, but the majority were custom cakes.
Yes.
When did you realize, hey, this might be, more than like, hey, I'm making birthday cakes for my kids, or maybe for, a friend or a family member or something like that, but this could be a business opportunity more than just, one-offs here and there. Maybe even someone comes to me and says, hey, can you make a cake for me? But, hey, I can start something and make a business out of this. When did that kind of start to become a vision in your mind?
It was essentially just I need to come up with a different idea because I am not good at this insurance world. What else am I good at? What else is, now there's, a plethora of cake decorators and bakers to choose from in Omaha. But kind of when I started, there wasn't quite as many. So it was kind of more of a niche market. And so I saw there was kind of a need for that, and not that I was the best at it. I was still definitely learning and still am, but it was something that I was good at and that I could continue to work on, and yeah.
So I remember her first cake. It was actually my birthday cake, and she made a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle one. And so it was like, I don't remember what year that was, but like it was the first time she went all out for a cake. And it was really good. But like the Ninja Turtle ones, it was just kind of like, kind of brought me back to like when I was a kid having cakes. And then working at Boys Town, she started doing some of the baking and Cassie's creation before we left Boys Town. And it was just like little things there. But we have a community inside of there where all the family, and so we do celebrations with our kids, and so I know that like one year she did all the cupcakes for a New Year's celebration, and so we have like 300 kids on campus, and so she did the cupcakes and she put them in these glasses, like a champagne glass with candies underneath, and it was really cool. It was the way that they rang in the New Year, and so that was one of the big things that she did on campus, and it was creating memories for our kids, and it was again that expression of care that she had, but many times like we got to experience first with our kids, and she probably gave some of the kids their first like birthday cake, and not all of them because they all have different backgrounds and come from different places. But that was one of the experiences that we did have, is celebrating our kids in our home, and she made a big deal about that. Or when we did, we had a Halloween, and so it's like we want to do age appropriate things, and so our high schoolers couldn't go out to go trick or treating, so we did a big party, and I'll have to find the image and share it with you, but she did this cake, and it had strawberry over the top of it, and it looked like a brain, and then she made like cupcakes that looked like they had teeth, and our kids talked about it for weeks. And it was before we really dove into like thinking outside of Boys Town or any of those other things, but it was just kind of like a hobby that she was good at. Like she's like very humble, but very, very creative and very talented, and she pours everything that she has into what she does. And so that was her way of kind of building that for our kids, of like, this is what we experienced, or what like we want you to have before you become an adult, or what you should have as a kid. And so it just kind of grew from there. But we are in Omaha, and there is no shortage of talented cake makers and people that do that. And so it just kind of grew as we were going. So
what was that like for you, Quentin? Because, you were doing the Boys Town thing, you kind of move out of that phase of life. You see Cassie, she's trying to do the insurance thing. That's not fitting her personality exactly. But this whole baking thing is. And early on, I'm sure you didn't know it was a business, but it's kind of like, there's something here. What is here? Like, how did those wheels start turning in you guys' brains to realize that, hey, maybe this is a business? So.
I think we always talked about, like, I'm a big guy. I like food. But that used to be a thing that we would do. Like, early on, like, before we started family teaching, like, she started making like stuff at the house, and I grew up in kitchens. So I grew up at Los Solomillos. Like my house literally backed up to Los Solomillos. I'd smell the garlic and the bread and the pasta sauces.
Man.
Dino used to come over, and he took care of all the neighborhood kids. And Don and Marie, they're just great people there. But then it's like high school, that was my first job, and I got to like see homemade, fresh made, cooked, like great food on the daily. And then I grew up in other kitchens too. And so it's like, you know, I managed Bob Monkey's Noodle Zoo, which isn't here anymore, but they had a lot of really good recipes that they made in-house, and worked at Lansky's and a lot of South Omaha places. But like, I grew up in those kitchens, and so that was just always something that we both kind of talked about. And so then as we left, we just kind of talked about concepts. And so it's like in our heads, we have got like 4 concepts of different things that we want to go to. And, you know, hopefully we kind of, those will materialize over time. We're just kind of taking it slow with what we have right now and just trying to move forward with that. So, but that was kind of where it was, is I can come up with ideas, but she can execute them better than anybody that I know. And, you know, some of the recipes that we make are some of the ideas, like we grew them together. So, but you know, I know that her wheelhouse is in the kitchen, and I don't mean that like anyway, but like that is just, she's got a talent, and that's what she loves to do. And that has always been the area that like, and so we kind of bounce ideas off of each other that way. And we worked with each other. Like 2013 is when we started family teaching. And it is one thing to like live with your spouse, but it's another thing to work with them and be there 24 hours. And so we managed to become a really good team and just know what each other needs. And sometimes she knows what I need before I do. So, and we've always had to have that good relationship and knowing this is your talent and this is what you're good at, and this is what I'm good at in the home. And so we always had to do that. And I think that that's something that we still do, which makes everything work for us. So.
I apologize if this started earlier than I have it documented, but from what I found on Facebook at least, May 23rd, 2023 was the first time that you sold something savory. You sold tamales for Cinco de Mayo, and we're very excited about that. At what point did you start thinking, hey, maybe I can move beyond, I can do baking, I can do baked goods, I can do awesome cakes and everything, but I can also move into the savory world? When did that enter your mind?
So I essentially was, wanted to grow like the baking business. And so I had rented a space out like a collective store. So that, a whole bunch of people can sell their items at one store. And so they also had a kitchen, and I was there for a little while, and I was like, I can, I guess, expand a little bit. And so after being there for a little while and seeing like, well, I mean, nobody's really, nobody's selling food. They're doing, like cakes and cupcakes and sweets and stuff like that. And I was like, well, why don't I just start putting out actual, dinners and stuff like that, family meals, tamales, stuff can, because I guess I don't know how it is now. But back at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of places in West Omaha where you could just stop in and buy tamales. And that's something that a lot of people were requesting. And so I was like, okay, well, let's just start slowly putting things that, meals, different things, savory things that people can buy and take home. So, yeah.
And that sparked a whole new part of the business, opened up, catering, all kinds of new options. June 12th, 2023 is when you officially changed the name of the business. And Quentin, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but it moved from Cassie's Creations to Against the Current. What was it that inspired that name change?
So essentially, I chose Cassie's Creations because I'm not good at naming things. So I, and when it was a cottage bakery, out of my house, doing, sweet treats and stuff like that. Like, I felt like it was fine, but I was like, if I want to like expand and grow and not just have this be more of like a side hustle type business, then I want it to be a little bit more, I guess, business sounding.
Buttoned up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little more polished, a little, there's a whole lot of, names that sound similar to Cassie's creations all over America. And I didn't want to blend in with everybody who had the same blank creations, whatever, So I was like, I want to stand out a little bit. And he is the one that's really good at, the ideas, as he said.
You're the marketer, the brander.
He is.
I guess that's a lot of pressure there. If there's any posts that people don't agree with it, that maybe it wasn't me. No, but no, it was intentional. So that was the thing. Is she was like, she talked about the idea, and she's like, everybody has these names. There was like I think another like very very similar baker that had a name that was like we were just like, well, how do we move past this? Like, what's something that we can do? And I think we had like several different names on the table that we wanted to do. And I think during that time, like, we were looking at moving outside of Boys Town, or we just moved outside of Boys Town. And so it was just kind of like, how do we kind of create something here that like reflects Omaha, that reflects kind of the space that we're in, that is different. And I mean, Upstream Brewery, like Upstream, I think they might get their name from Omaha because there's some parallels there between Against the Current and Upstream. It translates to and so that was kind of where it was. She's like, I just want something different. I want something that kind of reflects Omaha, that's a little more versatile, and it just took us a little while to kind of to land on it. That's how it's been with all of the names, I guess, that we tried to come up with. So.
And then on September 14th of 2023, so a couple months later, you had a pop-up at the Omaha Bakery, and that was when you sold what you called NDN tacos for the first time. So the food item that's obviously become a core part of Tradish-ish. Were there like, first of all, what inspired you to serve those for the first time to the public? And was there kind of like a seed planted in your head like, hey, that there might be something here beyond just this pop-up?
So it's, I guess, an item that a lot of people like request in the area, and not a lot of people, you can't really find it very often unless, people are doing like their pop-ups or whatever. And so essentially, yeah, as much as I like cooking all foods and doing, kind of whatever, I also want to stand out a little bit. Like, I don't want to make the same things that everyone else is making, even though I really enjoy all of these foods. I also want to hone in on foods that people don't get very often, and things that, I guess, spark curiosity, create the ability to have conversations and learn about other things, other cultures that they don't really know about, and just create like I guess that community of, good food, good learning stuff,
So in 2016, we actually took a year away from Boys Town, and during that time, we had talked about what we wanted to do when we retired. And I have always wanted to do Powwow Trail, and so we go to all these community celebrations within different indigenous nations, and so we have the Omahas, they have theirs in August, and the Ho-Chunk or the Winnebago, theirs is in July. And every single time that we go there, we get Indian tacos, and it's pretty standard. Each time you go to those places, you kind of run into the same thing. It's just fry bread, meat, cheese, some lettuce, And so we started talking about it then, because I was missing home, because these are like homelands. This is where we go. And it was approaching that time, and have some relatives, they do like lemonades, and they do like other things at those, and that's what they do for their life. And I was like, man, we should just get a food truck and we can just go to each powwow and that'll be what we do. But then I was like, but what do we do that's different? And I was like, man, what if we did like fry bread pizza? Because every time we go there, it's like people offer the same thing. It's Indian dogs, Indian burgers, Indian tacos. I was like, or what if we did like Philly cheesesteaks, like do something really good with a Philly cheesesteak? And so we started talking about that, and we came back, and I kid you not, we walk onto the powwow grounds, and the very first thing that we see is there's somebody that has a stand, and they're doing Indian taco bites, and they put pizza sauce over it and cheese and pepperoni. I'm like, what? Like, so that was my retirement. Like, but we had some ideas there. And then as like we kind of grew the concept, we moved into different spaces. That was one of the things that was kind of presented to us was a person we were working with. They were like weekly specials, something different, something new. And like we looked to see what is out there, but how could we take that to the next level? And so we continued to do that. So that's kind of incorporated some of what we do with Tradish, but also kind of like the concept and the idea of that kind of came before then. Like it was like this was home. Like, you know, when I go home and like I visited the reservation, my aunt used to come out and she'd be like, oh, I'm going to whip up a little fry bread. And she comes out with this giant bowl of bread, and like my chubby little heart just like exploded. Like I was so excited to see it, but I would only get that every once in a while. Yeah. And that's kind of how it is in Omaha, the Omaha area. It's like, man, we get it when we go to like powwow, or we would get it when like somebody did a pop-up, but pop-ups are a lot more like frequent or happening a little bit more now than what they were, you know, back then. And the opportunity to kind of go out and get those was a little bit different. You had to know somebody that was making fry bread or that would do that. And we didn't always have that. So
I want to put a pin in the cheesesteak idea because we're going to come back to that.
Okay, all right.
So you guys make an excellent version of a cheesesteak. But I wanted to go back to a Facebook post that you guys had that kind of described the cuisine that you were trying to create, because I think that this summed it up so beautifully, and I'd love for you to expand on it. You said, in Native culture, food isn't just about what's on the plate. It's about who you share it with, the history behind it, and the gratitude for everything that made it possible. How do you feel like you express that ethos through your food at Tradish?
I think it's the intentionality of where we source from, how we source, and how we create it. So a lot of times it's I had the opportunity to go to like the Indigenous People Summit, or when we were talking about even going and when I went to Portland, Oregon, and the 12 canoe families harvested salmon. It was just out of this world, and it was way different. But we look at everything as relational, and it is even the food that we're given. And so it's a reciprocal relationship. It's kind of like we care for the earth, and the earth cares for us. So like we take care of like our plant relatives, and they provide a harvest for us. And we also talked about like where our food comes from and that relationship. It used to be a relationship between the earth and the food and us, the animals and us, and we would make an offering, and we'd make sure that we didn't waste any of those things. And so making sure that we are sourcing from those places and from those communities. So like our honey comes from, I believe, the Iowa tribe, and we have as many teas as we have. I know that the Tribal Tea Company is one of the teas that we use. I know that there is another one that we source from up in the
Red Lake Nation.
Red Lake Nations. The rice that we use comes from Red Lake Nations. Choke cherry sauce. Like we try to make sure that we are doing that as much as we can. We're trying to build relationships with those communities, just because that is reflected in like care and food and intentionality. And we also know that when we source from them, it's going to be a little bit different. It used to be like when we would travel home when I was a kid, and this was from the Indigenous People Summit, we talked about like crops. They're like genetically modified, and there's pesticides and herbicides and all these different things in there, and it impacts all these different parts of our ecosystems. Driving home when I was 5, there'd be June bugs and all these things on my windshield. And now if I make that drive, I don't have to clean my windshield off anymore. And that is terrifying in some ways. But also, like, it just talks about our impact on all of these relatives that we have, the system that we have. So we make sure that, like, as much as we can, we source from communities that are doing things that care for the environment, that care for our relatives.
Essentially, this isn't just, I guess, a food business. It's not just a restaurant or a food truck. It's also about giving back and helping and teaching and learning and growing as a community as a whole. And if I had an entire restaurant space to work with, like, we would incorporate so much more. And one day that will happen. But
I was going to say, here's to hoping, because the bit that I've had of your food so far, I'm just like, I want more. I want to experience more of this. Like, I know that this is dipping my toe in the food of the indigenous people. I want to experience this fully. So I hope that it grows. I hope that it expands, and I'm crossing my fingers that continues to happen, because I want more of it. Let's talk about October. August 27th, 2025 at Bushwhackers. That was a country music bar in Ralston. It's since switched ownership, switched names, but that was your grand opening for Tradish. This was when you kicked it off and you served the public for the first time. What do you remember most about that night? What memory pops to the front of your brain?
it was crazy.
Crazy good?
Yes, and a very big learning experience. So our real first day being, open, it was the very first Husker tailgate. And they get busy. And I have been a server, but I have, outside of doing the catering and stuff like that, I've never worked in a restaurant kitchen. So, and neither did anybody else that was working with me at the time. Quentin's the only one that has the experience in the kitchen, and he was not there because we do have 4 kids. So, and he also has a full-time job. So, that was a very big learning experience for sure. Because I had to learn how to, 1, manage employees, 2, manage the kitchen, 3, how do you, what are the best processes to make sure, these people get their food in a good time. But it was fun. I don't like to sit still. I don't know if anyone can notice, I've been shaking this whole time because I just don't sit. I enjoy chaos. I enjoy moving and, not just, yes, I enjoy consistency, but, it's got to have a little flair. So, which is why I enjoyed Boys Town so much, because, it was always something. But yeah, no, that was fun. And it wasn't a deterrent in any way. It was more of a motivator to figure this out. This can work. I enjoyed this. How do we make this better? So
I think something that you guys do really well is that, you kind of mentioned this isn't strictly indigenous food, but it's a fusion. It's an introduction for people. So if somebody comes and they look at your menu, they're, choke cherry chicken. Well, that's kind of similar to barbecue chicken. There's a bison burger. So there's bison being incorporated, but it's in burger form. I've had a burger before. That's familiar to me. Mm-hmm. Maybe the best representation of that is your version of the cheesesteak, which is I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the Umanhan?
Omaha.
Omaha.
Yeah.
Omaha. Okay. It's as simple as that. But that's kind of your version of the cheesesteak. How did that menu item come to life?
That was just some creativity, trying to find something in that space that people would enjoy. It is not 100% Indigenous inspired by any means, but we had to adapt to the environments that we're in. And so there is a Philly steak on Leavenworth Street that is my favorite. And I was like, man, how do we improve that? Like, how do we, and I shouldn't say improve that, but how do we play off of what they are doing great? And I was like, man, I want some chipotle peppers. I want some raspberry preserves. I want and so then we just kind of like ran with it. And it was like, and Philly steaks always have the same colors. Like, it's always like green peppers and the onions. And I was like, I want something that like kind of marries with what we're doing. And so we went with some red peppers and some red onions, and that is just kind of where it kind of came from. It was just kind of playing with some different flavors and some different ideas, but to kind of fit the space that we're in. And I guess that's kind of, in some ways, that you could say that's Indigenous, adapting to different circumstances and environments and places that you're in. But it was just being kind of creative in that moment and just trying to figure out something that we could get that would be good but different.
So initially, when we had come up with the concept of Tradish, we had all of these grand ideas and all of these menu items that we wanted, and finding a restaurant space is not easy. I thought it would be, and then reality kind of hit me, and it's not as simple as it seems. And so I had got introduced to the owners of Bushwhackers, and they had the kitchen space and the clientele, and they didn't want to do the kitchen, and so they that was offered to me, and so I took it. But then we're like, well, how often are people going to a country western dance club going to want like braised bison ribs and all this great food, but it's not necessarily bar food? So we had to pivot just a little bit, but we still tried to incorporate as much as possible. It's like with our barbecue sauce, which you'll find like on our bison burger, but it's like that our signature barbecue sauce there for like our pulled pork sandwich is the Wojape barbecue, and just trying to find different ways to like incorporate native cuisine or culture into our food there while still managing the types of food that people will want to eat at a bar.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And just for anyone who wants to find Tradish, now Bushwhackers has become Guitars and Cadillacs.
Yep.
Same building, just under a different name. You guys serve out of there, but you also have a food truck, which we could do a whole episode on the learning that comes into creating a food truck and everything. Don't have time for that right now, but what I'm so curious, because obviously this is a new cuisine in Omaha. It's not being served at very many places. In fact, you guys have had Facebook posts and Facebook videos where you're like, hey, come out to the food truck today. If you're one of the first 5 people to get an Indian taco today, like, you can get it for free, but we need to get like a response video from you and showing us, what you think of it and everything, because this is new. What has the response been from Omaha as they've started to experience these indigenous foods a lot of times for the first time?
We get a lot of really good response. A lot of people, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't really know what some of this stuff is, but it's familiar enough to make them like still okay with like trying it. And I don't know that I've gotten any bad responses. People really enjoy it, and they're really amazed that this is missing in Omaha, essentially. People don't really think about the fact that, we have all these different cultures in Nebraska and Omaha, and it's great. I love the, diversity, but people don't ever think about the fact that we don't have any like Native American cuisine. We don't have anybody representing like, you know, the cultures that were here before everyone else. So they're a lot of times pleasantly surprised with what the food is and tastes like, and because a lot of times they don't really know what to expect, and you know, so
Indian tacos aren't anything that's gonna like shock anybody. It is like dipping your toe. But there's all those events, and so like when, you know, going back to this time I had salmon in Portland, Oregon, or we just had an honoring at Boys Town for our graduates, and we didn't cater that one, but we had somebody come in that did very, very traditional indigenous foods, and our kids were high school kids at Boys Town, and like we had like 30 or 40 of them. They were just like, "This is what?" Like, and they're looking at like this spread. And there was like a braised bison and sage roasted potatoes, and it had like a blueberry sauce, and we had Three Sisters salad there, and smoked salmon, and like a cinnamon apricot corn tea. And our kids are just like, "We're not eating that." It's like, I was like, okay, like just give it a shot. And they went through, and the very next thing I know is one of these, there's a girl who's a freshman that was there, and she was very vocal about not wanting to try the food. I look over, and she's got this plate, and it's just heaped on her second one, and she's like, "This is amazing." She's like,
won her over.
Yeah, and so it's like, but I think that's kind of the experience that we see from a lot of people. The First Bite Reacts videos, it's like, you know, you can just see it on their face, like, whoa, like, this is good. Like, I was like, and so Indian tacos and some of the stuff that we're doing, it is just, you know, a very small intro into some of the flavors and some of the foods that we have here. So
I take a lot of pride in making good food, not just okay food, not food that I like because I have the palate of a toddler. So I take pride in making food that most everyone will like. 'Cause like I say, you can't please everyone, but making sure that it tastes good, like it's well seasoned, the flavors marry well together. It's not just, you know, I'm just gonna throw this random stuff in there. All of our seasonings we make ourselves. I don't really like to use, like, you know, seasoning mixes. So I just take a lot of pride in making sure that things are made well and taste good, and it's, yeah.
You do a great job.
Thank you.
I'm just going to throw that out there. Last question I have for you guys, and I don't want to speak for you, but looking at your social media, over the last couple months, there's been a lot fewer posts on Against the Currents page. That's been pulled back a little bit. Whereas on Tradish's page, things have ramped up, and it's like, if not daily posts, it's close to daily posts about here's where the food truck's going to be, here's what we're going to be serving at Guitars and Cadillacs, here are, you know, the specials for the week, whatever it might be. When you look at the future of your businesses right now, what is the future of your businesses and your family?
So I hope to just grow both of them. I am not huge on social media. Like, even my personal page, like, I hardly ever post anything. The only time I ever really get on there is for business purposes. Watch stupid reels to help me go to sleep at night, and that's about it. I am terrible about remembering to, like, take pictures and to, you know, post the pictures and, you know, all of that stuff. And so that's where Against the Current kind of lacks, is because I'm in charge of that. And then I gave him access to the Tradish page because I was like, I'm just not a social media person. I wish I could be. I should be, given, like, you know, my generation, but I'm not.
It's a different skill set than cooking. It is.
Yeah, I am creative and artistic and all of that, I am not with words, not with, coming up with things to say. And so he does a lot of the posting for Tradish, or I'll just tell him, hey, say something about this today, or like, hey, here's a picture of this, can you post it, say something, whatever, and then he'll figure out what to put on there. And so the catering is still very much alive. It's just social media relies on me, and it's not.
I think a lot that we look at too is just like, there's no accidents, but life just kind of shapes the way we move. Sure. And I think that that's kind of where we're at. Going back to like everything in our story, it's just kind of like circumstances that just kind of align perfectly. Like how we met, how we got to Boys Town, how our business went. The fact that we even got into to Bushwhackers at the time. Like that was just all, I don't want to say coincidental, but it just kind of happened. And so where we're at with our business is that like there are so many great people out there that offer services, but what is it that we offer that's unique and what is different? And that is kind of where we're putting kind of our energy into. The food truck is a new venture, and there's a lot more that goes into kind of managing both the kitchen space at Guitars and Cadillacs now and the food truck, and just trying to grow that business and kind of stay, I don't want to say stay relevant, but there are so many great options in Omaha. We just know that there is, if you want tacos, if you want pizza, if you want ice cream, like we have all of those options here. How do we continue to kind of, one, stay visible and stay seen? How do we offer something that is a little bit different than everybody else? And I think that just kind of guided where we're at. There's so many caterers out there. And against the current, we can make everything that you want. You want pasta, like, I learned some things at La Solomio's, and so like we make a killer or pasta sauce at home. It's not La Solomio's by any means, but we have our own touch to what we do there. But you can get pasta, and people and a lot of times people are the easy known options. They're going to go with those. We are just kind of in the spot where I think that this is where we're at, and what we see the future as being is just kind of these moments where we can kind of capture a little bit of a market that nobody else really has right now. And I think that has kind of been where we've focused our energies, just because it's fun, it's new to us, it's fun for us, but also it's different, and it is something that we can provide that's different.
Well, I thank you guys for being bold and for stepping into that different lane, because there are so many people in Omaha like me who had probably never had fry bread, or maybe have never still had fry bread before you existed, much less, the choke cherry, the chicken versus the bison ribs versus the other things that you're providing. Like, I thank you for stepping boldly into that lane of Indigenous cuisine and saying, Omaha doesn't have this yet. We're not sure if Omaha is ready for this or if Omaha wants this, but we're going to step forth and we're going to try this, because Omaha does need this. And this is a beautiful, wonderful cuisine that I love seeing represented, and you guys are doing a fantastic job of it, and I thank you for doing that. People, you need to try this food. By all means, if you need a great cake, if you need catering, Against the Current is fantastic. I'm not trying to steer too far away from Against the Current. Against the Current is great in what it does. But if you want to experience Indigenous Native American food, this is a wonderful way to do so. Follow Tradish on Facebook. You can stay up to date on where the food truck is going to be, on what's going to what and when is going to be served at Guitars and Cadillacs. You want to try this. Trust me, one bite of fry bread in, my wife was just like, you're the food guy. Why have you not brought this to me before? Why has it taken so long? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I will do my best to do it more in the future. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time today to come on the podcast. I wish I could talk to you for just hours and hours. There's so much more that I want to ask you. Unfortunately, we're up against the clock, but I thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time and and for just everything that you've done for this community. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us,
Yeah,
and thank you for giving us a
appreciate
shot, or coming and trying our food. So we really do appreciate that. So.
Absolutely, and I will be back. I
All right.
promise you that. Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.